Hi friends, welcome to Telugu One Academy. As part of Polity Quick Revision classes, today we will take up yet another important topic, local self-governing institutions. So myself, Dr. M. Harinath Reddy, Faculty for Indian Polity and Constitution. So if you see the Constitution of India from 1950 So from 1950 to 1992, the Constitution of India was a two-tiered federation. But from 1992 onwards, India became three-tiered federation. So what do you mean by two-tiered federation and what do you mean by three-tiered federation? So in any federal constitution, if there are two levels of governments, if the governments are at two levels, then it is called a two-tiered federation. United States of America is an example for a two-tiered federation. So in United States of America, the federal government and the state governments derive their powers from the Constitution of USA. But the local governments, they don't derive their authority from the Constitution. But if you take countries like India, Nepal, Switzerland, they are all examples for three-tiered federation. So in countries like India, in Nepal, in Switzerland, the central government, the state government and even the local governments, they derive their authority directly from the Constitution. So that's the meaning of the three-tiered federation. So if you take the Constitution of India, the Constitution of India was initially two-tiered federation. From 1950, 26th January till 1992, India was a two-tiered federation. So only the central and the state governments were constitutionally recognized. But in 1992, the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution, the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution, they have conferred constitutional recognition to both rural and urban local self-governing institutions by inserting almost 34 articles. The 73rd Amendment inserted 16 articles, 74th Amendment inserted 18 articles. So a total of 34 articles were inserted and then the constitutional status is conferred. So from 1992 onwards, the Constitution of India, which is federal, is a three-tiered. We have the 7th schedule under Article 246. The 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution divides the powers between the center and the states in the form of three lists: union list, state list, concurrent list, and the residuary powers are with the center. Similarly, the 11th schedule of the Indian Constitution, created through the 73rd Amendment, has identified 29 items. So these are 29 items are to be devolved from the state government to the local governments. So 11th schedule divides the powers between the state government and local governments. Similarly, the 12th schedule, which was inserted again in 1992 through the 74th Amendment, again divides the powers between the state government and urban local governments. So that's how India is a three-tiered federation. Then let's discuss the constitutional provisions relating to local governments. In the Constitution of India, we have one article which deals with Grama Panchayat. This is Article 40. Article 40, it speaks about establishment of Grama Panchayats and endowing them with such powers and authority as may be necessary to make them as institutions of self-government. So there is only one article in the Constitution of 1950 which spoke about the local governments, that is Article 40. But here also remember, Article 40 is part of the directive principles of state policy, which means establishment of Panchayat Raj institutions is left to the discretion of the state government. So when to establish local self-governing institutions, whether to establish local self-governing institutions or not, it is completely left to the state governments. Why is it left to the state governments? Because it is a subject in the state list. So in the Constitution of India, in the 7th schedule, in the Constitution of India, in the 7th schedule, list 2 deals with the state list. So local government was there in the list 2 in the state list under entry 5. So it is a subject of the state government. But as Article 40 was a part of directive principles of state policy, we all know that directive principles of state policy, which are laid down in Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, they are non-justiciable, which means if the state governments don't create local governments, we cannot go to a court of law to give directions to the state governments. It is up to the wish of the state government whether to establish local governments or not. So the executive branch or the legislative branch cannot be compelled by the courts. That's about Article 40. But remember, the problem with Article 40 is Article 40 it speaks about only Grama Panchayat. We all know that Grama Panchayat is the local self-governing institution at the level of village. What about the Panchayat Raj institutions at the intermediate level, say Mandal Parishad? What about the Panchayat Raj institutions at the district level, Jilla Parishad? So Article 40 is a silent about the intermediate Panchayat and also the district Panchayat. Article 40 is also silent about the urban local bodies. For example, now under the 74th Amendment, we have 3 categories of urban local bodies: municipal corporation, municipalities, Nagara Panchayat. So for a bigger city, we have municipal corporation. For smaller towns, we have municipality. And an area which is becoming from rural to urban, we have Nagara Panchayat. So Article 40 is completely silent about urban local bodies. It is also silent about Jilla Parishad and Mandal Parishad. It speaks about only Grama Panchayat. So it means the Constitution of India, which came into force on 26th January 1950, did not contain adequate provisions with respect to local self-governing institutions. That's what we can draw conclusion. And then again, if you go back to the Constituent Assembly, in the final constitution which came into force on 26th January 1950, we had Article 40. But if you take the draft constitution prepared by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, this draft constitution was silent on the issue of local self-governing institutions. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had an apprehension that by creating local self-governing institutions in the rural areas, the local self-governing institutions which are created in the rural areas will be dominated by the upper caste people, and the power captured by the upper caste people in the rural local bodies will be used to perpetuate domination over the lower caste people. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had a fear that the elite, the better off, the upper caste people will capture power in the rural local bodies and will use this power to dominate the lower caste people. Because of this fear in the mind of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, in the draft prepared by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he did not include any provision with respect to local self-governing institutions. But later on, with the intervention of Mahatma Gandhi and with the intervention of Gandhiites within the Constituent Assembly, in the final constitution which was adopted and enacted by the Constituent Assembly, provisions were made with respect to local self-governing institutions. That too, the provisions are not adequate and detailed. So there was a reference to Grama Panchayat merely in Article 40, and in the state list, in list 2, there is this local government. So that's something to do with the constitutional provisions and the Constituent Assembly work, the work of the Constituent Assembly. Then let's see the evolution of Panchayat Raj institutions in this country. So in India, after India got independence and after the Constitution came into force, in India we have 2 important programs which were taken up for implementation: Community Development Program, National Extension Service. So for the comprehensive development of rural areas in the entire country, 2 important programs were initiated by Union government. One is Community Development Program, the second one is a National Extension Service. After these programs were rolled out, after they have been in implementation for some time, to review the implementation of these programs, to what extent these programs have been successful in meeting their objectives, one committee was appointed, that is Balwant Rai Mehta committee. Balwant Rai Mehta committee. So, Balwant Rai Mehta committee was appointed to study the impact of community development program and the national extension service in promoting rural development. So, Balwant Rai Mehta committee in its study has found out that these schemes have not made a significant impact on rural development in the rural areas. And Balwant Rai Mehta committees had felt that without involving the people in the implementation of these two schemes through the local self-governing institutions, it is very difficult to create good outcomes of community development program and the national extension service. So, in this context, Balwant Rai Mehta committee has recommended establishment of a 3-tier panchayat system in this country. So, that is the beginning of evolution of local self-governing institutions in this country. So as part of the local self-governing institutions, we will try to discuss how the local self-governing institutions in India have evolved over a period of time, starting from Balwant Rai Mehta committee till Gadgil committee. So, what are the different phases? Then later on we will try to discuss about the 73rd amendment to the Indian Constitution, the provisions of the 73rd amendment, the provisions of the 74th amendment, then what is the implementation of the 73rd and 74th amendment, to what extent the 73rd and 74th amendments were successful in achieving their desired objectives. We will also discuss the PESA Act, Panchayat's Extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996. Then what are the recommendations made by Second Administrative Reforms Commission to strengthen local self-governing institutions, that also we will discuss. So, we will discuss about the evolution of Panchayat Raj system, we will discuss about 73rd amendment. So, within the 73rd amendment, the provisions are broadly classified into compulsory provisions and voluntary provisions. And related to Panchayat Raj, there was one important legislation made by the Indian Parliament, PESA Act, Panchayat's Extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996. This we will discuss. So, now as I told, this Balwant Rai Mehta committee was appointed in the year 1757 January. It gives the report in November 1957, and we had a body called NDC, National Development Council. This is the body which gives approval, final approval to the 5-year plans prepared, and NDC will contain the Prime Minister and all the Chief Ministers of the different states. So, the report of Balwant Rai Mehta committee was discussed in the meetings of NDC, and NDC has given approval for implementing the recommendations of Balwant Rai Mehta committee. And then finally, the recommendations of the Balwant Rai Mehta committee, remember Balwant Rai Mehta committee has recommended a 3-tier Panchayat Raj system. At the village level Grama Panchayat, at the intermediate level Panchayat Samiti, at the district level Jilla Panchayat. But remember, the elections at the Grama Panchayat level, they are direct, but the members of the intermediate Panchayat and the district Panchayat are not elected directly by the people. So, the elections to the intermediate Panchayat and the district Panchayat, they are indirect elections. So, the elected representatives of the Grama Panchayat will elect the members of the intermediate Panchayat. The members of the intermediate Panchayats will in turn elect the members of the district Panchayat. So, Balwant Rai Mehta committee has recommended for establishment of a 3-tier Panchayat Raj system in this country, and it is in the state of Rajasthan. So, by then there was one minister by name S.K. De. This minister in the union government is from the state of Rajasthan. In his constituency Nagaur, the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system was inaugurated, was formally started on October 2nd, 1959. So, this is an important date, October 2nd, 1959. So, which means though Constitution of India had provisions for Panchayat Raj institutions from in 1950 only, but it took almost 9 years for setting up of the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system in the country. So, now Rajasthan is the first state to come up with a 3-tier Panchayat Raj system in Nagaur. Then followed by, this is on October 2nd, 1959, as I told you. Andhra Pradesh is the second state to implement the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system at Shamshabad. Then Ashok Mehta Committee. See here, before we discuss Ashok Mehta Committee, see the evolution of the Panchayat Raj system has been broadly divided into three phases. See 1959 to 1964, this is one phase. Then 1965 to 1969. Then from 1969 to 1977. These are the two phases. If you take phase 1 from 1959 to 1965, this is called a phase of ascendancy. So, in the very beginning, there is a lot of interest in establishing Panchayat Raj institutions. But later on, Nehru died in 1964. Between 1965 and 1969, you see the stagnation. The initial enthusiasm with respect to local self-governing institutions has come to a standstill in this period. And the period between 1969 to 1977, it is called phase of decline. Phase of decline. So, these are the three phases, and these three phases were discussed by Ashok Mehta in its committee report. So, he calls the period from 1959 to 1964 as the period of ascendancy, the rise of Panchayat Raj system. Then the period from 1965 to 1969, he called it as the phase of stagnation, losing interest in Panchayat Raj system. Then 1969 to 1977, it is called the phase of decline. Then if you take the Ashok Mehta Committee, Ashok Mehta Committee has recommended a two-tier Panchayat Raj system in the place of a three-tier Panchayat Raj system. So, Ashok Mehta Committee said it is necessary to have a panchayat for at least 15,000 to 20,000 population for economic viability. If you create an elected local government for every village with even a small population like say 500 and 1000, such a government which is elected will not be economically viable. So, Ashok Mehta Committee has recommended a two-tier system, one at the district level, the other one at the mandal level. For a population of around 15 to 20,000, there shall be one panchayat at the mandal level. Then above that there shall be Jilla Parishad. This is the most important recommendation of Ashok Mehta Committee, a two-tier Panchayat Raj system. Then he also spoke about the taxation powers to the local bodies. He spoke about social audit of the schemes implemented by the Panchayat Raj systems, and he also spoke about conducting elections to the local bodies at regular intervals. So, the Ashok Mehta Committee has recommended that in every state, in the State Council of Ministers, there shall be one minister who is looking after the local self-governing institutions. In addition to this, we know that in every state there is a senior IAS officer who is designated as the Chief Electoral Officer. So, the Chief Electoral Officer working under the Election Commission of India must conduct elections to the local bodies. That is what Ashok Mehta Committee has recommended. So, it recommended compulsory powers of taxation to the Panchayat Raj institutions. Then he also said that the non-governmental organizations, they should play an important role. Non-governmental organizations should play an important role in ensuring the participation of the people in the Panchayat Raj institutions. And then he also recommended reserving seats to the disadvantaged social groups in the local bodies. I said initially B.R. Ambedkar had a fear that if local bodies and local governments are created, the power in the local governments will be captured by the upper caste people. But that can be avoided by reserving seats to the Dalits, tribals, by giving them seats in proportion to their population. That was recommended by Ashok Mehta Committee. It also recommended conferring constitutional recognition to local self-governing institutions. So, these are the important recommendations of Ashok Mehta Committee. The next one is a GVK Rao Committee. So, GVK Rao Committee, it has made the following important recommendations. GVK Rao committee says district is the ideal unit for planning and development. To take up planning and development, district is the ideal unit. It also said a district development commissioner should be the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Jilla Parishad. At the district level, planning and development should be entrusted to the Jilla Parishad, and the Jilla Parishad should have a CEO, Chief Executive Officer, who is called the District Development Commissioner. And then it also recommended that the function of the planning must be decentralized. Some of the functions of the planning must be decentralized from the state government to the local self-governing institutions. It also recommended, GVK Rao committee also recommended conducting elections to the local bodies at regular intervals. And there should be no supersession of the governments of the local bodies for a very long period. That's about GVK Rao committee. One is for planning and development, district is the ideal unit, and it must be done in the Jilla Parishad. So Jilla Parishad must have a chief executive officer who is called District Development Commissioner. Then some of the functions of planning, they must be decentralized from the state to the local level, to the level of the local governments. And it also recommended conducting regular elections to the local bodies, because that is the period when this committee was working on its report. That's the period wherein the state governments were not conducting elections to the local bodies at regular intervals. So by this period, we did not have the State Election Commission, which is an independent authority to conduct elections to local bodies. So State Election Commission was created in 1992 under the 73rd and 74th Amendments. Before 1992, we did not have a State Election Commission. And the Election Commission of India sitting in Delhi has no role with respect to conducting elections to local bodies. So elections to the local bodies is being conducted by the state government itself, and the states are not conducting elections to the local bodies at regular intervals. So that's the reason why Ashok Mehta committee and GVK Rao committee, they have recommended conducting elections to the local bodies at regular intervals. That's about GVK Rao committee. The next one is LM Singhvi committee. So this LM Singhvi committee was appointed by Rajiv Gandhi government when Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister. So the important recommendations of LM Singhvi committee is, LM Singhvi committee also has recommended conferring constitutional recognition to local bodies, Panchayat Raj institutions. What do you mean by constitutional recognition? So amending the constitution and incorporating in the Indian constitution detailed provisions with respect to local self-governing institutions. That's one important recommendation. In addition to this, LM Singhvi committee also is important for one reason, because it has recommended for the establishment of Gram Sabha. What is Gram Sabha? All the voters in a particular Grama Panchayat, they constitute Gram Sabha. So Gram Sabha is a tool of direct democracy. So it is in the Gram Sabha where the people can directly participate and can take decisions. So in the final amendment which was done in 1992, the 73rd Amendment, we have provided for the establishment of Gram Sabha, and there was a recommendation made by LM Singhvi committee. So in addition to recommending for conferring constitutional recognition to the Panchayat Raj institutions, it recommended the establishment of Gram Sabha. It also recommended for establishment of judicial tribunals. If there are any disputes with respect to elections to the local bodies, to resolve these disputes, LM Singhvi committee has recommended for the setting up of judicial tribunals. It also recommended for the establishment of Nyaya Panchayats for a group of villages. In addition to all of these, it also recommended conducting elections to the local bodies at regular intervals. In addition to this, it also has recommended giving more financial resources to the local bodies. So that's it about the recommendations of LM Singhvi committee. The next one is a Thungon committee. So like LM Singhvi committee, Thungon committee also recommended giving constitutional recognition to the Panchayat Raj institutions. In addition to this, Thungon committee has recommended establishment of a 3-tier Panchayat Raj system, and it also recommended a fixed tenure of 5 years for the Panchayat Raj institutions. In addition to this, it has recommended for the establishment of a State Finance Commission and a 3-tier system. Then it recommended constitutional recognition. It has recommended reservations to the women on the basis of population, a fixed tenure of 5 years, and there shall be a chief executive officer for Jilla Parishad, and he should be the district collector. So district collector should be the CEO of the Jilla Parishad. These are the important recommendations of Thungon committee. The next one is Gadgil committee. So it is on the basis of the recommendations of the Gadgil committee, the 73rd amendment to the Indian Constitution was taken up. So the most important recommendations are, it has recommended direct elections. I said in the three-tier Panchayat Raj system which was recommended by Balwant Rai Mehta committee, there are elections, direct elections only at the level of Grama Panchayat. Elections at the intermediate and at the district level, the elections are indirect. But this Gadgil committee has recommended elections, direct elections at all the three levels. Say for example, now we have Jilla Parishad, Mandal Parishad, Grama Panchayat. So the members of the Jilla Parishad must be chosen directly by people. The members of the intermediate Panchayat, that is the Mandal Parishad, also should be elected by the people directly. Similarly, the members of the Grama Panchayat also should be elected directly by the people. So at all the three levels, at the level of Grama Panchayat, at the intermediate level and at the district level, the elected representatives at all the three levels must be chosen directly by the people. That is, direct elections at all the three levels. And it has recommended a three-tier system. Then it also recommended for the establishment of a state finance commission to look after the finances which the local bodies need. So the state finance commission must recommend to the state government to devolve finances to the local bodies. It also recommended the establishment of a state election commission. I told you from 1950 till 1992, in India we did not have an independent election machinery at the state level to conduct elections to local bodies. The state governments themselves were conducting elections to local bodies, and these elections were neither free nor they were conducted on time. So to conduct free and fair elections regularly, Gadgil committee has recommended for the establishment of a state election commission as an independent election machinery. That's one important recommendation. It also recommended constitutional recognition to the Panchayat Raj institutions, that is amending the constitution, incorporating the provisions in the Indian constitution related to Panchayat Raj institutions. It also recommended a fixed tenure of 5 years to the local self-governing institutions, that is the Panchayat Raj institutions. In addition, the most important recommendation is reserving seats in the Panchayat Raj institutions to the tribals and Dalits in proportion to their population. So this will prevent elite capture of Panchayat Raj institutions by the elites, that is the upper caste people. In addition to this, it also recommended reservations to women. These are the important recommendations of Gadgil committee. It also recommended giving taxation powers to the local bodies, the Panchayat Raj institutions. The next one is 73rd amendment. So the 73rd amendment to the Indian Constitution, it deals with the three-tier Panchayat Raj system: Grama Panchayat, Mandala Parishad, Jilla Parishad. So the 73rd amendment to the Indian Constitution was done in 1992 during the P.V. Narasimha Rao government. But remember, when Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister, 64th Constitutional Amendment Bill with respect to Panchayat Raj institutions, he has brought in 64th Constitutional Amendment Bill. With respect to urban local bodies, he has brought in 65th Constitutional Amendment Bill. But these bills could not be passed, and as a result, they have lapsed. When P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister of India, the 64th Constitutional Amendment Bill was passed as the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution. 65th Constitutional Amendment Bill was passed as the 74th Amendment. The 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution dealt with the three-tier Panchayat Raj system. The 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution dealt with urban local bodies. If you take the 73rd Amendment, to the Indian Constitution, it has inserted 16 articles in the Indian Constitution. The 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution has incorporated detailed provisions with respect to the 3-tier Panchayati Raj system. So, a total of 16 articles were added, and also a new schedule was also added to the Indian Constitution, that is the 11th schedule. So, 11th schedule, it spoke about 29 items which are to be given to the 3-tier Panchayati Raj system. Then, in the provisions of the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution, there are two kinds of provisions: compulsory provisions, voluntary provisions. So, compulsory provisions are those provisions which every state government has to implement. Voluntary provisions are those provisions which where the states have a freedom whether to implement them or not. And remember, the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution was dealt by Part 9. Part 9 of the Indian Constitution deals with the 3-tier Panchayati Raj system, and it was inserted in 1992 through the 73rd Amendment. Remember, the 73rd Amendment and the 74th Amendment, they are done. These amendments are done by Parliament by special majority under Article 368. So, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, they have approved this amendment, that is by a majority of total membership and 2/3 of the members present and voting. In addition to this, half of the states have also given approval. Then, let us discuss in detail the provisions of the 73rd Amendment. See, the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution, it speaks about the 3-tier Panchayati Raj system. But remember, in all the states where the population is less than 20 lakhs, in all the states where the population is less than 20 lakhs, you don't need to create a 3-tier system. You can have Grama Panchayat and a district Panchayat. The Panchayat at the intermediate level need not be constituted. In all the states where the population is less than 20 lakhs, you can have a 2-tier system, not necessary to have a 3-tier system. The Panchayat at the intermediate level can be ignored. But in all the states where the population is more than 20 lakhs, it is necessary to have a 3-tier Panchayat Raj system to be in place: Grama Panchayat, Mandal Parishad, Jilla Parishad. And as I told you, the provisions of the 73rd Amendment, they are broadly classified into mandatory provisions and voluntary provisions. Mandatory provisions mean these provisions must be implemented. It is compulsory to implement these provisions. So, in the 73rd Amendment, all those provisions which are to be implemented compulsorily, they are called mandatory provisions. And there are some other provisions which the state governments can either implement or choose not to implement them. They are called voluntary provisions. Then what are the mandatory provisions in the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution? The mandatory provisions include: one is establishment of State Election Commission. It is compulsory that every state should establish a State Election Commission. Then why should you create a State Election Commission? As I said just now, to conduct free and fair elections to the local bodies, the Panchayat Raj institutions and also the urban local bodies at regular intervals. The 73rd Amendment and the 74th Amendment, they have provided for the establishment of a State Election Commission consisting of a State Election Commissioner. So, it is compulsory for every state to establish a State Election Commission. We also have Election Commission of India. So, here it is pertinent to ask a question. What is the question? So, what is the difference between Election Commission of India and the State Election Commission? So, remember, the State Election Commission conducts elections to the local bodies: Grama Panchayat, Mandal Parishad, Jilla Parishad, Municipal Corporation, Municipality and Nagara Panchayat. That's it. But if you take the Election Commission of India, the Election Commission of India conducts elections to the office of the President, Vice President, Parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, state legislatures, Assembly and Legislative Council. So, Election Commission of India conducts elections to the office of the President, Vice President, Parliament and state legislatures. State Election Commission conducts elections to both rural and urban local bodies, right? And again, State Election Commission is an independent constitutional authority. If you want to remove the state election commissioner, he can be removed like the judge of the High Court. A judge of the High Court can be removed like the judge of the Supreme Court. And if you want to remove the state election commissioner, he can be removed only by the parliament through a removal motion supported by total strength of the two houses and also by 2/3 of the members present and voting. So it's very difficult to remove the state election commissioner. Though he is appointed by the governor, his removal is done by the parliament. So it's very difficult. That's the reason why the state election commission is an independent constitutional authority with a security of tenure. So establishment of state election commission compulsory. Every state must do it. The next one is State Finance Commission. State Finance Commission. So we have discussed in the earlier video the role of the Finance Commission of India. So on the recommendations of the Finance Commission of India, the central government gives a share to the states in the net tax revenues of the union government. In other words, financial resources are devolved from the center to the states on the recommendations of the Finance Commission of India. So on the same lines, there was one more body which was created at the state level called the State Finance Commission. So State Finance Commission will recommend to the state government with respect to devolution of financial resources from the state to the local bodies. So establishment of State Finance Commission is again a mandatory provision. It is compulsory. The next one is reservations to SCs and STs. This is again compulsory. The 73rd Amendment says that the seats must be reserved to the SCs and STs at all the three levels in proportion to their population. For example, we have 16.6% of the total population, they are Dalits in the entire country. So in India, in the total population, 16.6% are Dalits as per 2011 census. Similarly, at all India level, we have 8.6% of the population being tribals. So if there is a state, 8.6% of seats in the local bodies must be reserved for the tribals. 16.6% of the seats in a state in the local bodies must be reserved for the Dalit community. So the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution reserved seats for the tribals and the Dalits in proportion to their population. And this is mandatory. Every state must do this. Then there are also reservations for women. Again, this is a mandatory provision. No state can say that we will not implement reservations for women. So the 73rd Amendment says 1/3 of the seats at all the levels must be reserved for women. This is again a mandatory provision. But giving reservations to OBCs, other backward classes in the local bodies, it is not a mandatory provision. So seats in the Jilla Parishad, Mandal Parishad, Grama Panchayat, if you want to reserve seats in these three to the OBCs, the state legislature can take a decision by making a law. But it is not compulsory for the state legislature. If it wants to give reservations to the OBCs, it can give. If it is not interested, it can say no. Then in addition to this, establishment of State Election Commission, establishment of State Finance Commission, reservations to SCs and STs in proportion to their population, reserving 1/3 of the seats for women, mandatory provisions. In addition to this, a 3-tier Panchayat Raj system. In all the states where the population is more than 20 lakhs, it is compulsory to establish a 3-tier Panchayat Raj system. In the states where the population is less than 20 lakhs, you can have a 2-tier system. Then the minimum age to contest to the local bodies, it is laid down as 21. And this is mandatory, it has to be implemented by all the states in the country. Then the Panchayat Raj institutions have a fixed tenure of 5 years. The Panchayat Raj institutions have a fixed tenure of 5 years. So these are the mandatory provisions under the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution. In addition to this, one more one is Gram Sabha. Establishment of Gram Sabha in every Grama Panchayat is again a mandatory provision, compulsory. The states cannot say no. Then what is Gram Sabha? I just told you. Gram Sabha, it refers to all the voters in a Grama Panchayat. So Gram Sabha, if it is established, it can allow the citizens to directly participate in decision making. Gram Sabha is a tool of direct democracy. Remember, India is a representative democracy at the union and at the state level. But at the village level, we have the provision for establishment of Gram Sabha, allowing for a direct democracy to be practiced in India. So, all these are mandatory provisions of the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution. Then when it comes to the voluntary provisions, giving reservations to the OBCs is a voluntary provision. Then in the 11th schedule, we had 29 items. So, devolving functions, finances and functionaries to the three-tier Panchayat Raj system with respect to all the 29 subjects in the 11th schedule is again a voluntary provision. It is not mandatory provision. So, which means the states, according to their convenience, according to their comfort, they can either devolve or can reject devolving powers, finances and functionaries to the three-tier Panchayat Raj system. Then, in addition to this, one is reservations to OBCs, the second one devolving the 29 items. In addition to this, in the intermediate Panchayat, that is Mandal Parishad and also in the Jilla Parishad, the members of the parliament and members of the state legislatures can be ex officio members. So, that is again a voluntary provision. If any particular state government wants to make a member of parliament as an ex officio member of the Jilla Parishad and Mandal Parishad, it can do that. Similarly, if any state government wants to make an MLA or an MLC as a member of Jilla Parishad, ex officio member of the Jilla Parishad or Mandal Parishad, the state is allowed to. This is again an optional voluntary provision. It is not mandatory. But here at the village level, the Sarpanch can be either directly elected or indirectly elected. So, that is left to the concerned state government. That is a voluntary provision. So, at the level of every Grama Panchayat, whether to have a directly elected Sarpanch or indirectly elected Sarpanch, it is left to the concerned state legislature. But at the intermediate level, at the level of Mandal Parishad, at the level of Jilla Parishad, the chairperson of the Jilla Parishad and Mandal Parishad should not be directly elected by the people. He must be chosen from among the members of the Jilla Parishad. The chairperson of Jilla Parishad is chosen from among the members of the Jilla Parishad. And similarly, the chairperson of the intermediate Panchayat, that is Mandal Parishad, is also chosen from among the members of the Mandal Parishad. This is indirect. So, the election of the chairperson of Jilla Parishad and Mandal Parishad shall be indirect. It should always be indirect. That is again compulsory provision. So, that is about the mandatory provisions and compulsory provisions of the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution. And the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution also provides for audit of the finances of Panchayat Raj institutions. In addition to this, the courts are barred, the courts are prevented from interfering with the elections of local bodies. Then in addition to this, the provisions of the 73rd Amendment, they do not extend to 5th schedule and the 6th schedule areas. 5th schedule and the 6th schedule areas, again in the states like Nagaland, Manipur, Tripura. So, the provisions of the 73rd Amendment, they do not apply, they do not extend to certain areas. So, 5th schedule areas, 6th schedule areas, Nagaland, hilly areas of Manipur and Tripura, in these areas, the provisions of the 73rd Amendment, they are not applicable to these areas. So, in the 11th schedule, these are the items which are laid out. Sometimes in the prelims exam, in the UPSC as well as other exams, which one of the following is an item in the 11th schedule? Which one of the following is not an item in the 11th schedule? That is how the questions are coming. So, it is better for you to read the list multiple times so that you can remember better. So, there is nothing for me to discuss the list because there is nothing which is conceptual, much of it is factual. So you should remember by reading it multiple times. What are the items in the 11th schedule? What are the 29 items in the 11th schedule? Tomorrow there can be a question, and questions have come. So which one of the following is mentioned in the 11th schedule? Which one of the following is not mentioned in the 11th schedule? So this is the list of 29 items. With respect to all these 29 items laid down in the 11th schedule: functions, functionaries, finances, they must be devolved, they have to be devolved to the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system. It is not mandatory, it is left to the discretion of the state, because Article 243G deals with the 29 items in the 11th schedule. Remember, if it is a mandatory provision, there will be the word shall. In any article, if there is a word shall, then it means it is compulsory. If the word used is may, then it is voluntary provision. So Article 243G says the states may devolve powers, finances and functionaries with respect to the 29 items to the Panchayat Raj institutions. That is the wording used in Article 243G. The states may means may not be also. That is why it is a voluntary provision. So here is the list of compulsory provisions. So establishment of Gram Sabha, the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system, direct elections at all the 3 levels. This I have missed out. At the level of Grama Panchayat, at the level of Mandal Parishad, and at the level of Jilla Parishad, at all the 3 levels, elections are direct. But remember, while choosing the chairperson of Jilla Parishad and Mandal Parishad, it has to be done indirectly. That's again a mandatory provision. Indirect election of the chairperson at the intermediate and at the district level. Then the minimum age for contesting elections is 21 years. Reserving seats for SCs and STs in proportion to their population at all the 3 levels. And then 1/3 of the seats for women at all the 3 levels. A 5-year tenure. Then establishment of State Election Commission, State Finance Commission, they all come under mandatory provisions, compulsory provisions. Then when it comes to voluntary provisions, financial powers, that is devolving adequate finances to the local bodies, Panchayat Raj institutions by the state government is voluntary. It is not compulsory. Then powers with respect to economic and social planning, voluntary. Giving reservations to the backward classes, voluntary. Then whether to have an MP or an MLA or MLC to be the ex officio member of the Jilla Parishad or Mandal Parishad is again voluntary. It is left to the choice of the state. Then at the level of Grama Panchayat, whether to have a direct election of Sarpanch or indirect election of Sarpanch, it is left to the state government. That's again a voluntary provision. That's about the mandatory and voluntary provisions of the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution. And then let's discuss PESA Act, Panchayat's extension to scheduled areas. So what is this PESA? See, when I told you about the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution, we all know that the amendment was done in 1992. The 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution was done in 1992. It came into implementation on 24th April 1993. 24th April 1993. So that's the reason why 24th April is being celebrated as the National Panchayati Raj Day. So we are celebrating 24th April as a National Panchayati Raj Day. So the 73rd Amendment was done in 1992, but it came into operation on 24th April 1993. So this 3-tier Panchayati Raj system, when it initially came into operation on 24th April 1993, it was not extended to the 5th schedule areas. So what are 5th schedule areas? I told that in India, there are 10 states where we have predominant tribal areas. For example, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat. These are the states where we have tribal areas inhabited by tribals. So in all these 10 states, there are 5th schedule areas. So from 1950 to 1996, from 1950 to 1996, in the 5th schedule areas, the administration is carried on by the governor. And to give advice to the governor, there was a body called TAC, Tribes Advisory Council. So, TAC will contain the ST MLAs in the concerned state legislative assembly and some nominated officials will be there in the TAC. TAC will be chaired by the chief minister. So, on the advice of the Tribes Advisory Council headed by chief minister, governor took up the administration of the 5th schedule areas. So, governor was given the responsibility to make regulations for the peace and good governance of the 5th schedule areas. Remember, till 1996, from 1950 till 1996 in the 5th schedule areas, we don't have Panchayat Raj institutions, the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system. So, the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system was extended to the 5th schedule areas through a separate law made by the Indian Parliament, that is called a PESA. PESA means Panchayat's extension to scheduled areas. So, the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system was extended to the 5th schedule areas through a separate law made by the Indian Parliament, that is called PESA Act 1996, Panchayat's extension to scheduled areas Act 1996. And remember, this PESA Act, it was made on the recommendations of a committee appointed by Union government called Dilip Singh Bhuria. This is the committee which was set up. On the recommendations of Dilip Singh Bhuria committee, Indian Parliament has enacted the PESA Act in 1996. The purpose of this legislation is to extend the 3-tier Panchayat Raj system to the 5th schedule areas. That's about the PESA. Then what are the important provisions of the PESA Act? See, the most important provision of the PESA Act is, I told you about the Gram Sabha. Gram Sabha in the 5th schedule areas is much more powerful compared to the Gram Sabha in the rest of rural India. Under the PESA Act 1996, Gram Sabha was given sweeping powers. For example, Gram Sabha was given the power to identify beneficiaries. Gram Sabha was given the power to control the local functionaries. Gram Sabha was given the power to regulate intoxicant drinks. Gram Sabha was given the power to prevent tribal land alienation. Gram Sabha was given the power and ownership on the minor forest produce. Gram Sabha was given the power to give mining leases to mine minor minerals in the 5th schedule areas. So, name anything which is required by the tribals, this power is conferred to the Gram Sabha. So, when the PESA Act was made in 1996, the purpose of the PESA Act is to give self-governance to the tribals in the 5th schedule areas. We know that the 5th schedule areas were most affected by Naxalism, the left-wing extremism. So, PESA Act 1996 was thought of as an answer to the Naxalism. So, by giving self-governance to the tribals in the 5th schedule areas, we wanted to win over the minds and hearts of the tribal communities in the 5th schedule areas. And many had optimism that PESA will be an answer to the problem of Naxalism. But unfortunately, the PESA Act was not properly implemented in the letter and spirit. The Union Ministry of Panchayat Raj, which enjoys sweeping powers to give directions to the state governments for effective implementation of the PESA Act, has did nothing. So, the Union government did not take adequate measures. And there are certain central laws which are in conflict with the PESA. So, for example, PESA Act recognizes ownership of Gram Sabha on the minor forest produce. But Indian Forest Act 1927, Wildlife Protection Act 1972, they don't recognize the ownership of Gram Sabha on minor forest produce. So, these laws should have been amended to keep them in harmony or in compliance with the PESA Act. So, but these laws were not amended. As a result, the PESA Act could not give anything substantial to the tribals in the 5th schedule areas. In addition to this, in many states, the guidelines and rules and regulations which are required for implementing the PESA were not notified. Though the union government enjoys sweeping powers to compel the states to implement the PESA more effectively, the union government has not done its job in coercing the state governments in effectively implementing the PESA. So, PESA, because of poor implementation, has proved to be a failure in dealing with the Naxalism or left-wing extremism in the 5th schedule areas. That's it about PESA, Panchayat's extension to Scheduled Areas Act. Then, as I said, we started with 73rd Amendment in 1993. So, 2003, 2013, 2023. So, 10. It has been almost more than 30 years that the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution has been in operation for the last 30 years. So, what are the achievements and failures with respect to the 73rd Amendment? If you take the achievements of the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution, now we have a uniform 3-tier Panchayat Raj system throughout the country. We have a uniform 3-tier Panchayat Raj system throughout the country. That's one achievement. The second one, State Election Commission. Today, this is again a biggest achievement. Today, in every state, for conducting free and fair elections regularly to the local bodies, the 73rd Amendment has created an independent election machinery in the form of State Election Commission. So, the State Election Commissioners, they enjoy security of tenure because of the difficult removal through the Indian Parliament, and that was a very important development and improvement over the past because of the 73rd Amendment. Then the third one is political empowerment. Political empowerment. So, tribals and Dalits were given seats in proportion to their population. So, there is a massive political empowerment of tribals and Dalits. And within the seats which are allotted to the tribals and Dalits, 1/3 of them were reserved for the tribal women and Dalit women. So, for the first time, the tribals and Dalits, they had an opportunity to participate in decision making at the grassroots level. So, they became elected representatives in the local bodies. They had an opportunity to participate in decision making. That is massive political empowerment of tribals and Dalits. This also led to preventing the capture of power in the local bodies by the elite, the upper caste people. Then in addition to this, empowerment of women. The implementation of the 73rd Amendment, it led to the massive political empowerment of women. So, before the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution with respect to the rural local bodies, the representation of women in the rural local bodies is less than 6%. But after implementation of the 73rd Amendment, today we have 46% of the elected representatives in the rural local bodies, they are women. Though the reservation is only 1/3, 33%, but as of now, as per the economic survey of Government of India 2023-24, the total number of elected representatives in the rural local bodies, the women account for 46%. In more than 50% of the states, the women were given reservations to the extent of 50%. Though the constitution mandates only 1/3, they have reached more than 50%. So, there was massive political empowerment of women. Then again, we also have the State Finance Commission to recommend to the states devolving finances to the local bodies. So, these are some of the improvements because of the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution. And in addition, there were elections conducted regularly to the local bodies because of the State Election Commission. Earlier, the elections were not conducted regularly, and there was super sessions of the local bodies for a very long period. So, this was the improvement because of the 73rd Amendment. These are the achievements. Then what are the failures? See, the local self-governing institutions which were created under the 73rd Amendment in the form of Panchayat Raj institutions, these institutions were not given power. These institutions were not given power. In other words, they are empty shells. With respect to all the 29 items in the 11th schedule, functions, finances, functionaries are not adequately devolved. So, excepting for a few states, in most of the states, the local governments continue to remain financially dependent on the state governments. They do not have their own taxation powers, they are not economically viable, and they continue to remain very weak. This is the sorry state of affairs. Article 243G under the 11th schedule, which speaks about devolving the functions, functionaries and finances, unfortunately it was made a voluntary provision, which means the states do not have any compulsion to devolve functions, finances and functionaries. Even when the matters went before the Supreme Court and High Court, the courts took a stand that the states have the discretion whether to devolve functions, functionaries and finances or not. So, even the Supreme Court did not support devolving the functions, finances and functionaries to the local bodies. So, that was the status of implementation of the provisions of the 73rd Amendment. So, we are done with the Panchayat Raj institutions, the rural local self-governing institutions. We have seen the evolution of Panchayat Raj system. We have discussed about the provisions of the 73rd Amendment, both mandatory and voluntary provisions. We have also seen the status of implementation of the 73rd Amendment, what are the achievements and failures. And then let us move to the urban local bodies. At the end, we can discuss the recommendations of Second Administrative Reforms Commission for strengthening both rural and urban local bodies. So, now we will try to discuss about the urban local government, that is the municipalities. See, we all know that India was under the British rule for more than 150 years. So, the Regulating Act of 1773, starting from the Regulating Act of 1773 till Indian Independence Act 1947, this is the period in which we have been under the British rule. So, when we were under the British rule, the beginning of the urban local governments, the modern urban local governments, it all started under the British rule. If you see the evolution, the first municipal corporation was set up in Madras in the year 1688. The first municipal corporation was set up at Madras in 1688. Later on, in 1726, we have municipal corporations which were set up in Bombay and Calcutta. In 1870, there was one important resolution on financial decentralization, that is devolving the powers, decentralizing the financial powers to the local level. This is Lord Mayo's resolution on financial decentralization. The next one is in the year 1882, the Lord Ripon, the then Governor General of India, was also responsible for empowering the local self-governing institutions. So, that is the reason why we say the resolution passed by Lord Ripon is called the Magna Carta of local self-governing institutions. Magna Carta means the true foundations for local self-governing institutions, the Panchayat Raj institutions in India, were laid down during the time of Lord Ripon through his resolution. Then later on in 1907, there was one commission which was appointed on decentralization. Royal Commission on Decentralization, which was appointed in 1907. It gave the report in 1909. Then in 1919, if you remember, I told you that the Government of India Act 1919, it provided for the division of subjects into central list and provincial list. And in the provincial list, there are 50 subjects, which are again divided into transferred subjects and reserved subjects. So, local government was a transferred item under the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms or the Government of India Act 1919. So, Indian ministers were made in charge of transferred subjects, and local self-governing institutions was one of the transferred item under the diarchy system, which was introduced under the Government of India Act 1919. Then in 1924, so to administer the Cantonments Act was passed by Central Legislature. So, cantonment is an area where the military is stationed. So, to provide basic amenities in these cantonments, cantonment is a kind of an urban local body which was created through a separate law made by the central legislature then in 1924. Then in 1935 we had Government of India Act 1935. So Government of India Act 1935 provided for the division of subjects into federal list, provincial list and concurrent list. So local government was made a subject of provinces under the Government of India Act 1935. This is the evolution of urban local governments under the British rule. Then from time to time, after India got independence on 15th August 1947, from then till now, several committees were appointed from time to time to strengthen and improve the urban local governments. The first initiative in this direction was in 1949-51. So in 1949-51, there was one committee which was established. This was called Local Finance Enquiry Committee. Later on in 1953-54, there was one more committee, Taxation Enquiry Commission. Then in 1963-65, we had the Committee on Training of Municipal Employees. Then in 1963-66, we have Rural Urban Relationship Committee which was constituted. And again in 1963, we have the Committee of Ministers on Augmentation of Financial Resources of Urban Local Bodies. Then in 1965-68, there was one more committee on service conditions of municipal employees. In 1974, we have a committee on budgetary reform in municipal administration. In 1982, there was a study group on constitution, powers and laws of urban local bodies and municipal corporations. In 1985-88, we have National Commission on Urbanization which was established and which also has dealt with the urban local bodies. So that's about a number of committees which were appointed from time to time. Then we will try to discuss about the 74th Amendment. The 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution provided for three kinds of urban local bodies: Nagara Panchayat, Municipal Council and Municipal Corporation. So in India we have the following kinds of urban local bodies: Municipal Corporation, Municipality, Notified Area Committee, Town Area Committee, Cantonment Board, Township, Port Trust, Special Purpose Agency. Among these, we will discuss Municipal Corporation, Municipality and Nagara Panchayat as part of the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution. So these are the articles in the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution. 74th Amendment. So remember, the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution was again done in 1992. So the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution has inserted 18 articles to the Indian Constitution. And Part 9A dealt with urban local bodies. So the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution inserted Part 9A which dealt with urban local bodies. It also inserted a new schedule, 12th schedule, under Article 243W. Under Article 243W which deals with 18 items. So the 12th schedule to the Indian Constitution inserted by the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution, it speaks about 18 items which are to be developed to the urban local bodies. I said there are three kinds of urban local bodies: Nagara Panchayat, Municipality and Municipal Corporation. So with respect to these three local bodies, 18 items were listed out. With respect to these 18 items in the 12th schedule, powers, finances and functionaries were to be developed to the urban local bodies. Then for a transitional area, if there is an area which is getting transformed from rural to urban, for that there will be a Nagara Panchayat. Nagara Panchayat, though it contains the word Panchayat, Nagara Panchayat is a kind of urban local body for a transitional area. And then municipality is one more kind of urban local body for smaller towns. Municipal corporation is an urban local body for bigger towns and cities. So these are the three kinds of urban local bodies. Then, like the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution, 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution also contains mandatory provisions and voluntary provisions. If you take the mandatory provisions of the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution, like the 73rd Amendment, establishment of State Election Commission, establishment of State Finance Commission, then reservations to the tribals and the Dalits in proportion to their population, reserving 1/3 of the seats for women, and then fixed tenure of 5 years, minimum age of 21 years, then Article 243 JD. Article 243 JD, it speaks about establishment of DPC, District Planning Committee. So, the purpose of the District Planning Committee is to consolidate the plans, both rural and urban local bodies. The plans prepared by the rural and urban local bodies in a district, they are consolidated by the District Planning Committee. So, establishment of District Planning Committee is again a mandatory provision. Then in the metropolitan areas, there is also a provision for the establishment of Metropolitan Planning Committee under 243 JE. So, 243 JD deals with the District Planning Committee, 243 JE deals with Metropolitan Planning Committee. So, the Metropolitan Planning Committee will consolidate the plans prepared in that metropolitan area. So, establishment of Metropolitan Planning Committee is again a mandatory provision of the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution. Then when it comes to the voluntary provisions, in the urban local bodies, giving reservations to the OBCs is a voluntary provision. Then under Article 243W, devolving functions, functionaries and finances to the urban local bodies with respect to 18 items in Article 243W is again a voluntary provision, which means the states, it is not compulsory for the states to devolve these functions. Then similarly in the urban local bodies, whether to give ex officio membership to the members of parliament and the members of the state legislatures is again a voluntary provision. So, these are the mandatory and voluntary provisions of the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution. Then when it comes to the implementation of the 74th Amendment, what are the achievements and failures of the implementation of the 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution? One is a uniform system of urban local bodies throughout the country is one achievement. Then to conduct free and fair elections regularly to the urban local bodies, we have the State Election Commission. To devolve finances to the urban local bodies, we have the establishment of State Finance Commission, massive political empowerments of tribals and Dalits, massive political empowerment of women, then establishment of District Planning Committee, establishment of Metropolitan Planning Committee. These are all the positive achievements of the 74th Amendment. Unlike the 73rd Amendment, when it comes to the failures, in most of the states, the urban local bodies are not devolved adequate powers and adequate finances. And as a result, like the rural local bodies, urban local bodies also continue to remain weak because the state governments do not have the political will to empower the urban local bodies and they don't enjoy the adequate capacity to raise their own revenues because of limited taxation powers. So, when it comes to the local bodies, both rural and urban local bodies in India, they continue to remain weak because with respect to all the 29 items in the 11th schedule and 18 items in the 12th schedule, the devolution with respect to functions, functionaries and finances continues to remain inadequate. So, that is about the implementation of the 74th Amendment. Then let us discuss the recommendations of committees which were appointed from time to time. See, Manishankar Iyer is an important personality when it comes to the Panchayat Raj institutions. So, Manishankar Iyer was an officer of Indian Foreign Service. After having served for 20 years in the Indian Foreign Service, he became the Joint Secretary in Government of India. He drafted the 64th and 65th Constitutional Amendment Bills. So, this man also acted as the Minister for Panchayat Raj between 2004 and 2009 when the UPA government came to power. And Manishankar Iyer was a staunch advocate of strong local self-governing institutions in this country. So, under the chairmanship of Manishankar Iyer, a committee was constituted which gave the report in 24th April 2013. We all know that the amendment, the 73rd amendment came into implementation in 1993. So, 1993 to 2013 means 2 decades, 20 years. On the eve of 2 decades of Panchayat Raj institutions, Manishankar Iyer committee has submitted a report. The title of the report is Towards Holistic Panchayat Raj. Towards Holistic Panchayat Raj is the title of the report given by Manishankar Iyer Committee on Panchayat Raj institutions. So, this man Manishankar Iyer wanted the local self-governing institutions to be leveraged for effective delivery of goods and services at the grassroots level. So, this man Manishankar Iyer, when he was the Minister for Panchayat Raj Ministry, he has got a committee. He spoke to the cabinet secretary then and he got one committee appointed which is called Renuka Vishwanathan. Renuka Vishwanathan and Datta Ghosh. Renuka Vishwanathan Datta Ghosh committee. So, this is a committee which was appointed by the cabinet secretariat, and the findings of this committee is the union government and its ministries and departments are spending a lot of money for the development of rural areas. And the problem with we all know that the union government comes up with a set of schemes called centrally sponsored schemes. Centrally sponsored schemes are those schemes which are taken up by the union government on the subjects in the state list and concurrent list. On the subjects in the state list and concurrent list, the union government designs centrally sponsored schemes. They are implemented through the state governments. Funding is made by both central and state governments. Most of these centrally sponsored schemes have not been implemented effectively at the grassroots level. This Renuka Vishwanathan and Datta Ghosh committee have found the following made the following observations. The Panchayat Raj institutions were not given a central role in implementing the centrally sponsored schemes, in identifying the beneficiaries and in monitoring the implementation of centrally sponsored schemes. The Panchayat Raj institutions were not given any role at all. So, if you want to improve the implementation of centrally sponsored schemes at the grassroots level, we need to give a central role to the Panchayat Raj institutions, and we also need to empower the Panchayat Raj institutions for identification of the beneficiaries. That's what Renuka Vishwanathan and Datta Ghosh committee have said. And when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, there was a conference, and this conference spoke about poverty alleviation. So, poverty alleviation in the rural areas and achieving rural prosperity through Panchayat Raj. So, Dr. Manmohan Singh also spoke about achieving rural prosperity through Panchayat Raj institutions. And when he was the Prime Minister, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, he spoke about achieving complete independence through Gram Swaraj. So, achieving Purna Swaraj through Grama Swaraj. So, Purna Swaraj is an idea of Gandhi. So, if people have to enjoy the total freedom, complete independence, we need to empower the Panchayat Raj institutions. So, Purna Swaraj is possible only through Grama Swaraj. That's what Gandhi said, and that's what Manmohan Singh also reminded the states. Then, Manishankar Iyer has brought in an interesting discussion on economic reforms versus institutional reforms. So, what are economic reforms, what are institutional reforms, and what is the link between economic reforms and institutional reforms? We all know that from 1950 to 1990, we have come up with a model of development called a socialist model of development. So, giving lot of importance to the public sector occupying the commanding heights. But by the time we have reached 1990, this model of development has miserably failed, and that led to financial crisis. So, in 1990, we started with economic reforms. We say LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization. So these economic reforms, they started in 1991, and economic reforms in the last 3 decades, they created a lot of wealth in this country. More than 40 crore Indians were lifted out of poverty. So economic reforms is nothing but giving greater role to the private sector. Because of competition with the private sector, the public sector has also improved its efficiency. Because of competition among the several service private providers, the quality of goods have come down, the cost of the goods has come down, the quality of the goods has improved, and the choice of the citizen has expanded. So because of increase in economic growth, because of increase in GDP in the last 3 decades, the tax revenues of the union and the state governments have phenomenally increased. And this money is being spent for the development of the rural areas. So here Manishankar Iyer says, in India in the last 3 decades, economic reforms were quite successful in creating wealth in this country, in improving the tax revenues of the union and the state governments. But for this wealth, when this wealth is being taken to the grassroots level through the centrally sponsored schemes, this money did not effectively reach the grassroots level because institutional reforms have failed. So when we started with economic reforms in 1991, the next year in 1992, we brought in the 73rd Amendment and the 74th Amendment. So both rural and urban local bodies were given constitutional recognition. So though we created rural and urban local self-governing institutions, they are not adequately empowered. So because of the weak rural and urban local bodies, because they are not given any central role in implementing the centrally sponsored schemes and identifying the beneficiaries, lakhs of crores of money being spent in the name of developing the areas at the grassroots level have not yielded results because institutional reforms have failed. Institutional reforms in the sense, the rural and urban local self-governing institutions which were created through the 73rd and 74th Amendment, they have failed in taking the benefits to the grassroots level because the rural and urban local self-governing institutions are not adequately empowered in terms of functions, in terms of functionaries, in terms of finances. So it is the failure of institutional reforms which led to non-inclusive growth in this country. So Manishankar Iyer also coined the word inclusive democracy and inclusive governance. Greater involvement of local self-governing institutions at the grassroots level is called inclusive governance and also inclusive democracy. Even after 3 decades of 73rd and 74th Amendments, rural and urban local self-governing institutions continue to remain weak. If this continues, then the prosperity and wealth which is created through the economic reforms will not reach out to the grassroots level. So that's what Manishankar Iyer told about the link between economic reforms and institutional reforms. So it is a time for us to empower the local self-governing institutions truly so that they play a central role in implementing the centrally sponsored schemes and thereby taking the benefits to the people at the grassroots level. Then we will end our discussion by discussing the recommendations. Recommendations of Second Administrative Reforms Commission for strengthening local governments. We say second ARC. We had so far 2 Administrative Reforms Commissions. The first Administrative Reforms Commission was appointed in 1966. Initially Morarji Desai was the chairman, later on Hanumantayya was the chairman. And again in 2004 we had a second Administrative Reforms Commission headed by Veerappa Moily. So this second Administrative Reforms Commission has submitted 15 reports. The sixth report is about local governance. The sixth report is about local governance. In this report, Second Administrative Reforms Commission has come up with a number of suggestions for strengthening the rural and urban local self-governing institutions. If you see some of the recommendations, the first recommendation is in Article 243G and 243W. Remember, Article 243G and 243W, they deal with the 11th schedule and the 12th schedule. So with respect to 29 items in the 11th schedule, 18 items in the 12th schedule, functions, functionaries and finances are to be developed to the local bodies. But in these 2 articles, the word used is may. So that's why the states had a discretion. So second ARC has recommended amending Article 243G and W. So amend Article 243G and 243W, replace the word may with a shall. Then it will result in true empowerment of local self-governing institutions. That's one important recommendation. The second important recommendation is, we all know that in India, in the Indian Parliament, we have Rajya Sabha. So Rajya Sabha gives representation to the states. Similarly, Second Administrative Reforms Commission says the Legislative Council, which is the upper house at the state level, must give true representation to the local bodies. So Legislative Council in every state, wherever it is, must represent the will of the local governments like the Rajya Sabha at the national level. That's one more recommendation. In addition to this, Second Administrative Reforms Commission has also recommended, I told about the State Election Commissioner. As of now, the State Election Commissioner is appointed by the Governor on the advice of the state government. As the State Election Commission plays an important role in conducting free and fair elections to the local bodies, instead of the state government advising the Governor, Second Administrative Reforms Commission has suggested a broad-based committee consisting of the Chief Minister, Leader of Opposition in the Legislative Assembly and the Speaker of Legislative Assembly. A 3-member committee should recommend to the Governor the appointment of the State Election Commissioner. This will ensure the right kind of people getting appointed as the State Election Commissioner, and that will ensure free and fair elections to the rural and urban local bodies. That's one important recommendation. In addition to this, see, the delimitation of constituencies in the local bodies and also reservation of seats to the SCs and STs to the women. So this task must be assigned to the State Election Commission is one more recommendation. As of now, this is being done by the state government. We all know that the State Election Commission is an independent constitutional authority with the security of tenure. So if the reservation of seats and also the delimitation of constituencies is entrusted to the State Election Commission, it will play an important role. So through the 73rd and 74th Amendment, we are aiming at a devolution of functions, functionaries and finances. So unless there is an ombudsman to deal with the corruption in the local governments, we end up decentralizing the corruption to the local level. So to deal with the corruption in the local governments, Second Administrative Reforms Commission has recommended the setting up of a local ombudsman to deal with the corruption in the local governments. Then the expenditure made by the local governments is being audited by Director Local Fund Audit. So as auditing is an important function to verify the expenditure made by the local governments, the Director Local Fund Audit must be given the independence and autonomy on the lines of the State Election Commission. That's one more recommendation. Then when the seats are reserved for tribals and Dalits and women, every constituency, every seat must be reserved for at least 2 terms. If it is reserved for at least 2 terms, there will be an incentive for the people who get elected as elected representatives to nurture leadership and do good service to the people, because unless they do it, they will not get re-elected by the people. So if the constituencies are rotated at every term, then the elected representatives will not have any incentive to perform better. These are the important recommendations of the Second Administrative Reforms Commission in strengthening the rural and urban local bodies. So with this, we end the topic of local governments. We have discussed all the dimensions in great detail. Hope this video will be very useful for your not only prelims exam of UPSC, it is also very much useful for the mains exam. You can answer any kind of question which comes on rural and urban local bodies. So that's it for today. Thank you. We will come up with yet another video on another topic in the next video. Thank you.